Hi, everybody. Welcome to another show of the Everything Horror Podcast. And, well, we got a returning guest tonight. You might have remembered the episode with my buddy Alan, who unfortunately cannot make it tonight due to being busy. But, however, joining me to help out is my lovely fiance,
Tessa Baker.
And we are going to be talking the brand new documentary about cryptids involving birds in the sky, but not just any birds in the sky. We're talking like Mothman, Thunderbird, and the Piasa, if I even pronounced that right. But anyway, welcome back to the show, Seth Breedlove.
Yeah, you actually did pronounce that right, which is impressive because I've been pronouncing it wrong for like the last year, and I'm the one that made the movie. So, congratulations on that. On that alone, that's an accomplishment.
Yeah, well, we actually just barely finished watching it again. So when that came up,
watched it twice.
Yeah, we watched it twice. So we're like, so when that came up again, I'm like, Piasa, right? And then when the guy said it, I was like, okay, I've got to remember this.
Yeah, I called it Piasa for the better part of the last year, despite being corrected multiple times. So,
well, to be honest, that's completely fair because I think I almost said that too. So, and then I looked at Tessa and I was just like, Piasa, right? Or Piasa or something like that. She's like, I don't know. And then the guy says it, and I'm like, oh, I was right. Okay. Anyway, so this came out, if memory serves me right, on June 7th. And so this is your second movie of the year. You got one more coming out, I believe now. Well, it was originally, I believe, October or something. And now it's down to September, which is the Momo, the Missouri Monster. And you got some other upcoming projects in the work, which is amazing. And you just premiered some good news today that we can talk about in a little bit too. But to get things going now is so Terror in the Sky. The first question I really got, Seth, is did that name actually come from that other title or whatever it was supposed to be within that black and white God, I'm trying to figure out what it was technically supposed to be, like an ad or something. Like it was like Terror in Its Skies or something like that. Is that where the name of Terror in the Skies came from?
No, I actually made that though. I know what you're talking about. There's like you're talking about the faux newsreel footage that's in Terror in the Skies. No, I actually made that. That's like a phone that I created that to look like it was made in like the 1940s. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, no, it didn't come from that. The title mostly came from the fact that I didn't think a movie called like Winged Weirdies or Thunderbirds Above or something like that would really be marketable. So I named it Terror in the Skies, and we had gone pretty far into the promotion of the movie before I realized there's also like a Smithsonian television show that is called Terror in the Skies. So we are not about plane hijackings, which is what their show is about. Our movie's about giant winged cryptid seen over the state of Illinois. But the name was mostly just us being like, well, this is a cool title, let's call it that.
Well, fair enough. But yes, that newsreel thing definitely acted like it was real. Because I thought again, I'm like, is that where they got the name from, or just like something completely off? But anyway, I do remember from last time we were talking too that you were talking about when this was coming out. This was going to be using, of course, CGI, I believe is what it was, because of the whole, it's not really their cryptid, like, it's not like they're actually there while you're filming, or they could have been, but in this case you were using it as a way of not having to worry about practical effects, I'm assuming, or even the real deal.
Oh yeah. I mean, the only like quote unquote cryptid evidence in the movie, like actual footage that purports to be of a winged cryptid is the Texas John Huffer footage from 1977 that plays about halfway through the Lawndale sequence. That's the only footage in the movie that is actual sort of like footage of a Thunderbird. Most of what we used in the movie is either hand-drawn animation, and or yeah, there's a lot of like CG effects, and the effects crew, which is pretty large. There were a number of people that were involved in the effects on the movie. That was a pretty substantial group of people that was putting together, all the various sort of like found footage looking effects. But most of it was handled by Santino Vitali and SRV Films. And Santino's been working with us since last year when he started on the Flatwoods monster movie. But yeah, for the most part, it's CG. And we didn't do like a great number of sort of live action recreations. In fact, there's none. The only sort of sequence that is like a live action effect sequence is at the beginning of the movie, when it opens with the little boy in the field. That's the only sort of like live action cryptid moment in the movie. Everything else is hand drawn or CG, which is different from most of our other movies. Most of our other movies have a fairly large number of like live action recreations and practical effects and stuff. I mean, for the most part, we like to use practical effects if we can. Unfortunately, when you get flying giant birds, it becomes a little more difficult to practically create that.
Oh yeah, that's true. And to put on the record too, Seth, is Tessa and I have been busy since we last spoke, and we've been watching other films that you guys have created. Like we watched On the Trail of Champ, The Beast on Bray Road, or of Bray Road, and a couple other things that I think I'm missing. But yeah, we've been looking at the different.
Yeah, we've been busy watching your films.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, I'm actually really proud of everything we've done in the last couple of years. Just like the growth from something like Boggy Creek Monster to now is pretty crazy. If you watch them in that order, it's kind of insane to watch everything sort of spike and all the production values go up and all that kind of stuff. Everyone that works on these movies is constantly sort of improving all aspects of their craft, so that's been fun to watch.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I definitely, so far, one of my favorites besides like Terror in the Skies is definitely the Beast on Bray Road. I think that was pretty well done. But then again, I've been learning and listening to like Dogman encounters and stuff just to kind of hear more about the weird cryptids, and to not to get off too much on track, but if I had to go, like if I had to walk in the woods and see either a Bigfoot or a Dogman, I would probably want a Bigfoot more than a Dogman in this case. But just from all the stuff that I've heard that people have encountered with the Dogman versus the Bigfoot, but
yeah, the phenomenon seems to be a little nastier on that side of things.
Oh yeah, but then we got like the Goat Man, which is a whole new different thing in itself. So it's just ridiculous too. But I mean, that was the other one. Okay, because yeah, now that I'm remembering with everything and what I'm just about to ask too is, so we saw the Mothman again being mentioned in Terror in the Sky, which we watched that other one there, the Mothman.
Of Point Pleasant.
Yeah. And so at first I was just like, well, okay, so he did that with the Mothman. Why did he need it again in Terror in the Skies? And then as I watch both of them and look at it, I'm just like, oh, okay, well, this makes sense because, the original Mothman movie that you guys made is about the Point Pleasant, West Virginia bridge, or the Silver Bridge that overlapped and stuff like that. Well, it led to that, I should say. And then in this one, we're talking about sightings of the Thunderbirds and the Mothman and the Piasa. Well, here we go again. Piasa, thank you. Jeez,
I think
here
I
we
said
go.
that right.
Yeah, Piasa, yeah.
You got it, yeah.
Yeah, with the Chicago area. So it is kind of interesting to see, in this case, a different location for Mothman, especially for what he's known for, which is disasters and stuff like that. And one of the people were saying, I think, one of the people that you were talking with was mentioning something about, I forget how exactly it was worded, but it was something around how why is Mothman here in a big crowded area or something like that. But
yeah.
So the way I look at it is, well, why not? Because, if Mothman is known for disasters, Chicago, since it is a big area, as we kind of saw with the footage within The Terror in the Skies, is like, that would be a perfect, as much as I kind of hate to say it like this, but, it's true. But as we look at it, is Chicago would be a nice spot for a Mothman performance. I'm going to just say it like that.
Sure. Yeah. There's the weird thing about that, like the Chicago stuff, is that there's very little. It's like it's a hot button topic with the investigators. I mean, you can see that in the movie too. Like, there's no evidence that any of what's being claimed is actually happening, other than what someone like Tobias Wayland is telling us, or Lon Strickler, the guys who took the initial reports. So, since so many of those sighting reports are from anonymous eyewitnesses, it's really different from the Mothman in Point Pleasant case, because the Mothman in Point Pleasant case took place between 1966 and 1967, and there were sightings before that and there were sightings after that, but that 66 and 67 flap, quote unquote, is sort of the key events. Like, that's where the biggest stuff happened. And the difference, the huge difference between the two, is that the witnesses in that case, in the Mothman case, for the most part, we know who they were. We have their names and stuff. And in the Chicago case, we don't have that. We have a lot of anonymous sources. So it calls into question a lot of aspects of the Chicago Mothman. However, like, it's not to say that I don't think that there could be sightings happening of something called the Chicago Mothman, and who knows if it exists. Like, who knows why it would be there, and what it is, and why it's being seen around Chicago. But I do know that particular subject is really it's a hot button topic with a lot of people. There was a lot of arguing back and forth between the people we were interviewing over whether or not there was anything to the Chicago Mothman. And interestingly enough, too, the Terror in the Skies is sort of the middle chapter of what we're calling the Mothman trilogy. We're actually going to, so we made the Mothman in Point Pleasant in 2017, and that took a very in-depth sort of look at the 66, 67 Mothman flap, and then mostly focused on sort of Point Pleasant and some of the sightings on the other side of the river in Ohio, with very sort of tenuous mentions of the Men in Black activity and UFO activity. And then we made Terror in the Skies, which is devoted mostly to other winged cryptids, with maybe 1/4 of the movie focusing on the Mothman, but it does draw a lot of similarities between the town of Alton and Point Pleasant. And then next year we're making the Mothman Legacy, which is sort of it's revisiting the 1966-67 Mothman flap story, and really digging into a lot of the stuff that we didn't get to, like the Men in Black activity, UFOs, and sort of the changing face of Appalachian lore, and how the stuff that happened in the 60s in Point Pleasant isn't necessarily a new phenomenon, how it seems to be almost like, just a variation of something that's been going on there for centuries.
Okay. That would explain the why I'm seeing the Mothman pop up 3 times. Well, this will be the third time next year, as you just said. So, okay, that would explain because I was wondering why it seemed like you guys were really seemed to be not cramming out, but you guys were really focusing. It seemed on like Mothman for a few titles of yours. So, like, I was just more curious. So I didn't know if that like really had a spark interest in you guys, and that's why you guys wanted to like really dive into it. But
I mean, the Terror in the Skies is the Chicago Mothman seems to be a completely different phenomenon from something like the Point Pleasant, the Point Pleasant case. The Point Pleasant case is so big and so far-reaching that the hour and 6 minutes that our first movie was about the Point Pleasant, I mean, that was the runtime of the Mothman in Point Pleasant. We didn't even scratch the surface of what went on. And I always had talked about revisiting that story so we could really dig into, some of the Men in Black and UFO activity. And then there's a lot of cases like Mothman sightings that we just didn't get to in our initial movie. So yeah, the fact is, like, unlike a case such as the Flatwoods Monster or some of the smaller localized regional cases we've covered, the Mothman in Point Pleasant was a massive sighting event that took place not just in West Virginia but into Ohio as well, and a lot of those sightings have been sort of ignored or looked over. So we're and there's also just a desire for content about the Mothman, and which gives us an opportunity to revisit it, since we know that there will be eyes on it. It's the type of thing that we can make, and people will want to see it and support it, which for an independent production company is great. And it also, for us, we always wanted to revisit that story. This gives us sort of the opportunity to do that and have it be, almost like a no-brainer.
Well, in that case, then yeah, I'll be looking forward for that then next year for sure. And I think what really caught my attention about next year too is the Mark of the Bell Witch. I think that really caught my attention too. And of course, we got your On the Trail of UFOs that you also announced today, actually, with revealing the poster art. And I like the poster art. I definitely like the way you guys are designing the artwork for the poster / like DVD cases as well, which I gotta give props to whoever the artist is that's making that, because I just like the I don't know, the color or something. Like, I just really don't know. It just seemed to like catch you, and like it almost seemed to make the art pop in a way.
Yeah, Matt Pepler is the name of the artist, and yeah, he's amazing. It's we're trying to kind of keep all the On the Trail of projects branded in sort of the same way visually, so it's sort of easy to differentiate that from something like our movies where we have Sam Sheeran doing all the poster art. But yeah, the On the Trail of UFOs actually starts filming in I think 4 weeks, something like that, out in Nevada. So we're doing Nevada, Arizona, Utah, and New Mexico for the first round of shooting. And I'll be there it's not a very long trip, which is crazy because we're covering a lot of ground in a very short period of time. So we're going to be spending a lot of time in a car. But we'll be filming that, and then that will shoot throughout the rest of this year. Whenever I have a spare weekend or something, we'll be filming for On the Trail of UFOs, and then that will come out probably late next year. Like the tentative schedule is Momo comes out probably at the very end of September, and then there will be a lull until more than likely April of next year, when we'll put out the Mothman Legacy. And then the Mothman Legacy will be followed up in probably around Halloween, and by that I mean like the beginning of October, when the Halloween season kicks off, by the Mark of the Bell Witch. And then We are unsure right now of when On the Trail of UFOs will actually debut, but like the thinking right now is maybe not until winter of 2020. So like maybe December of 2020, but it's possible it could be out. It's just going to depend on how much work actually gets done during 2019 on it, because we actually plan on shooting the Mothman Legacy here before the year is out as well. So there's a lot of work we have to get through before the end of the year, but we're really looking forward to the Mothman Legacy because we get to revisit. It's our first time really revisiting a story like that. It's our first direct sequel, and then also we get to work on the Mark of the Bell Witch, which is something that we've been talking about for about 3 years now. So I know we're all really excited about all those titles.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely excited for the Bell Witch for sure, and like it's always cool to even go back to be able to revisit a story that you guys have done, like in this case Mothman, because when it comes to certain cryptid, you kind of have to go back because, like you just said, there's so much with the Mothman to even touch on. It's just, you probably could have made, like, instead of Mothman in Point Pleasant, you could have made, like, what you did with On the Trail of Bigfoot, like a 2-disc thing, just because you could have done probably so much more, too. Or you could have done Point Pleasant, but then you could have really, like, what you wanted to do to begin with like the Men in Black and everything else that had gone on with Mothman and everything else. So I mean, but we all know that time is money and money is time and all that stuff, so it doesn't really help either way. But either way, it's always nice to go back and revisit something, especially now, Seth, since I believe when we last talked too, is like you're still learning how to do things with small town monsters, and like even now you probably know a lot more so that when you do go into like the 3 films from next year, you'll probably try new things that you probably haven't really tried before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's always a lot of in the case of like Bray Road Beast, which you said you liked, that was another story where we could have easily gone back and covered it, because these cases they're not made up of like 1 or 2 sightings typically. They're made up of multiple sightings, and in the case of like Mothman and Bray Road, you're talking years of sightings, and when we go to make a movie, we are up against a wall of we're up against a wall of not just having to find witnesses, find people to talk about the subject, but we're also up against the obstacle of making these movies on an insanely low budget for what we're creating. Like the budgets are very low and there's very little time. We're usually in a location for anywhere from like 3 to 6 days tops. 6 days would be a long shoot for us. So it's usually more like 3 to 5 days, and then we're out. And in that time, we have to get all the interviews, that we have time for. And a lot of, like in the case of the Bray Road Beast, we had people dropping out and canceling interviews and things like that. So there's always obstacles we're running into when we're making these things. But at the end of the day, like something like the Mothman in Point Pleasant is an easy story to revisit because there's so much meat on the bones still to get into.
Right. And, well, that's pretty common that people would cancel their interview because at first they're excited about it, but then they start to realize, well, if I go out in public or put this out publicly, people that know me might come back at me. Because, I mean, look at like all the people back in the day where like 1960s, I think, or 1940s, 1950s, I think would be a good example, where we see and hear like old UFO stories. I'll just put it out there like this too, but where we hear like old UFO stories where this specific either family or this one person sees this UFO, whether it just flying in the sky or it crashes down into the earth somewhere, and they go and publicly say what they saw, and the next thing you know, newspapers publish their story, and then we get to town angry at the people that supposedly saw this, all because now there's nothing to prove this because it somehow vanished. So it doesn't surprise me at all that there's possibly some type of cancellation when it comes to interviews, just because they probably don't want to, at the very last minute, want to be in that spotlight after all, because they start thinking about
the ridicule factor is very high when it comes to any of these subjects, and especially in towns like Elkhorn, where the Bray Road Beast was seen, because for whatever reason Elkhorn is really shied away from the subject, and the town itself ridicules the idea of the Bray Road Beast. So any of the witnesses that did come forward are sort of mocked almost openly, even to this day, which is very different from a town like Point Pleasant, where they have a giant statue of the Mothman downtown. There's probably the biggest obstacle we run into when making movies is getting witness interviews, because they are so shy about coming forward, because they're usually aware of how they're more than likely going to be mocked or ridiculed for coming forward with it. It's like Kyle Danhausen talked in Terror in the Skies about how at work his boss would tease him about his story of seeing a giant bird in the sky for years. That's a very real thing. I mean, witnesses, if they do decide to come forward, end up being mocked for talking about this for years.
Or the one family there where the boy was being called the bird boy, and they were having people leave dead birds at their doorsteps and everything. Like, oh man, I couldn't imagine that type of backlash. And I mean, how do you even go out in public like that? Like, after you spoke publicly about what you saw, trying to warn people what's really out there, and then you get shot down. And I just wouldn't know how to take that. But then again, now, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess there is outlets where people can go, where people understand, like, Bigfoot, UFOs are actually out there and stuff like that. Like, I think I personally seen, just to throw it out there, not to trying to steal the moment too, but I even at one point believed that when I used to do traffic control, I thought I've even seen a UFO, just because I just couldn't really tell what the hell was going on. But it was only maybe I don't know, maybe a 10-minute thing, but it was really weird nonetheless of my story. And the partner of mine that actually was with me at the time no longer is here with us on this earth. He passed away a couple years ago, but otherwise I don't really have that many witnesses to back up my story. So that sucks nonetheless. But anyway, so once again, Seth, you probably had this already planned, with the Chicago Mothman, because as we were talking about the Mothman, with it being a trilogy thing going on here, and then we got the Thunderbird and stuff. So how did you guys really decide on doing something like this anyway? How did it tackle? Is it because of all the 3 different type of cryptids in this one state that really caught your attention, or how did you guys come up with that?
Yeah, I wanted to do a movie about, I think at the time I was reading about Marlon Lowe's Lawndale incident, and I was fascinated with that case and thought that would make a really interesting movie, but I also didn't think there was quite enough in just Thunderbirds to sort of, fill out a film. So we talked about doing basically an Invasion on Chestnut Ridge style look at the entire state of Illinois and all their winged cryptids. And once we hit on the idea of that, then I was much more excited about what we could do with that, because it opened up so many story opportunities and stylistic experimentation we could do with the film. And when we started talking about the Chicago Mothman stuff as being a part of that, we had been asked if we were planning on doing a Chicago Mothman for film on its own for quite a while, and I just didn't think there was enough there to really cover it. This opened up the door to kind of do almost like a film that in a way could feel like an anthology, and I at least that was the thinking initially. I don't think Terror in the Skies feels that way now. When I watch it, like all the stories feel really connected to me. But the idea originally was to make a movie that was going to be like almost like vignettes about different phenomena, and that changed somewhat during the edit, and I think it works pretty well as it is now, instead of more like Invasion on Chestnut Ridge, which did have that sort of anthology feel to it. But yeah, the idea was to do something that took an all-encompassing look at all of the creatures that might be seen in the skies over Illinois, and then once we got into sort of the research angle on it, we started uncovering all sorts of different sighting waves from 1948 in Alton, Illinois, and the sightings in Lawndale during '77, and then the Chicago Mothman stuff in present day, and then the Piasa legend, obviously, and then our two witnesses, Kyle Danhausen and Jeff Byers, who both had really interesting sightings of two very distinctly sort of different flying creatures. One of them seemed to be sort of a pterodactyl-looking thing, and that's what Kyle saw, and then Jeff basically claimed to see a very large winged bird with sort of a hooked beak, which is a really bizarre account, almost like a giant buzzard is what Jeff's account sounds like to me. But yeah, we were excited, I think, too, to kind of explore that classic Midwest location, which we also kind of did with the Bray Road Beast. But the Bray Road Beast is a very dark movie, and this was not envisioned as being a dark movie. It was always sort of supposed to be our Spielberg homage. A lot of like sunset shots and just kind of capture the isolated beauty of some of those really like I guess flat lands that exist in Illinois. And just to explore the entire geography of that state too, which is really interesting because it's almost like three different states in one. So yeah, it was like a combination of those factors, and then once you hit on the idea and the story you're going to tell, then you can start talking about like how do we visually want this to look. And strangely enough, like I mentioned Spielberg, which maybe a little bit in the opening of the movie with the boy in the barn in the field, but the thing that like inspired the look of the movie the most, or at least the visual cues I kept sending to my director of photography, were shots from Spielberg's North by Northwest, which is kind of weird, or not Spielberg, Hitchcock's North by Northwest, which is kind of weird because that's not really a Midwest movie. But we talked a lot about North by Northwest during the making of this, so I don't know if that's visually apparent when you're watching it, but that was that was the thing we most went back to.
Yeah, no, I did find it quite interesting where they were saying, Chicago or Illinois is like 3 states and all, or at least 2 states or something like that. Or it's like you're not even in the state of Illinois anymore when you come from like the city area of Chicago to the, I think as I remember right, the southern area where it's like mostly forest area. And that it is quite interesting how a state like that can change to something like almost like a country outlet near the southern area, and because we don't really see that much in states anyway. At least with where I am in Vermont, we're mainly like the country Green Mountain area, but then there's some areas like where you've been, possibly like when you guys used to do the on the Trail of Champ. For Lake Champlain area, that was mainly, you could say, almost like a city area, really, because there wasn't really too much mountains and forest over that way. But
yeah,
since you mentioned too, like, the different locations and stuff, I am curious, Steph, is when you guys were talking about that one specific cave for the what it Piasa?
Piasa?
Yeah. Now, when you guys were when you guys were going to that cave area, what was that area like where this cave is? Was it pretty well isolated? Was it really out in the middle of nowhere, or was it really kind of near, like, I'm trying to think, like, how to explain it. Like, is it near any type of town?
Yeah, I mean, the cave that we found, the Piasa cave, is actually on the other side of the mural. So when we're showing the mural of the Piasa, if you go, there's sort of a parking lot that sits, you pull in, as soon as you can see that mural right from the road. You pull into this parking lot, and then there's a clump of trees off to the side, and you can see where there's like a path that goes back there. And I think there's a couple of signs that say, like, don't go back here. But we went back anyway. Whoops. And it's an area that is, like, clearly sort of, they're been overrun with people, and from everything we could find, that's been a pretty popular, like, party spot back in the woods. But it's literally on the other side of that mural. You would go up on that hill, and then it's on the other side of that, back in the woods. So it's not isolated or rural. It's really close to the city. It's right there, right on the other side of those bluffs, and it looks like kids party there constantly. And we don't think that was the actual Piasa cave. But it's possible. There should actually be multiple caves. There are multiple caves around that area that are sort of rumored to have been, the actual Piasa cave. But that is, that particular bluff has that cave there, which is kind of cool since there's the whole legend of the actual Piasa cave.
Oh, well, fair enough then. I can't believe it would be, like, almost that far from, I guess, the public eye, I guess, because you normally, when you hear a cave, you don't really hear too many being out in the public, especially that close as it seems this one is, and especially how maybe how wide it is. I'm not really quite sure how I really want to. Maybe, like, the depths of the cave. Like, it does seem like a pretty big.
No, it's substantial. Yeah, it's substantial. If you get the DVD, you can see me walking. You can see all of us walking around inside of it. It's enormous. It was like, you could. The ceiling the ceiling on the cave had to have been like 75, 80 feet above us. I mean, it's a high, it's a very high bluff cave. The actual Piasa cave, though, the reason that I don't believe that would have been the actual Piasa cave is because the cave that was recounted, as being seen by the natives would have been actually on the side of one of those bluffs facing the river. So when you were coming down the river, you would have actually seen it from there. At least that's according to sort of lore. But there's a lot of disparity between what's been said about that cave and whether the cave existed at all. There are definitely a number of caves down in that area on those bluffs, and they're huge. They're really cool.
Fair enough. If it isn't like a Piasa cave, then maybe something else could be used in it. Anyway, like, I don't know, maybe a Bigfoot. We always usually hear cryptos do look for cave, no matter what type of monster it is, really. So, what to say, you're lucky that nothing was living in it, I guess, Seth. For you and your crew are all lucky. But one thing that really, I thought, struck a not nerve, but a chord, I should say, where I kind of went, that's very interesting. It's right as we kind of get toward the ending, where somebody mentioned for Thunderbird, like he doesn't understand why people are mainly afraid of them when, yes, they are big and stuff, but if we could study them, we could learn so much about animals and birds and everything else, which makes to be a very big topic of its own, really, because, like, we always talk about when it comes to cryptid, in order to make anybody believe, we need a body of some sort. So in this case, if we get a big Thunderbird, like, I don't know if we would really use it for studying. I think it would be more for, I don't know, like maybe a trophy, really. But I do like the idea of, well, if we could find a way to study these type of creatures without killing one or capturing one, because we all know how that's gonna go. But I just think that's a very interesting point, because then, depending on how old these Thunderbirds are, we could actually learn so much about not only the bird themselves, but maybe our culture in general, just because of how ancient these Thunderbirds are. Really, even the Piasa, like, even if we could study something like that, we could learn so much just to really see what's really out there, maybe in the skies, or if not on the ground too.
Sure, yeah. If they exist, it's that would be the ultimate goal, I guess, would be to prove
Right.
that they're there with some sort of body or something like that.
Yeah. Now, you were talking a little bit about your animation and stuff. Now, how long does your artist, for even trying to maybe tell the specific scene to your artist for the animation, how long did it take to create, like, the animation to help tell the story from your witnesses?
Well, the way that works is, so it depends on the animation we're talking about. With something like Chris Scalf's, the Lawndale sequence was done by Chris Scalf, and that took him, like maybe a week to actually flesh out. Chris works in a number of different styles, and I think he uses 3 different, if not 4 different styles in this film. There's sort of that hand drawn cartoon animation that he used on Lawndale, and then there's the maybe more like a painted style that he used for the little vignettes during Lyle's narrated sequences, where it goes through all the different sighting flaps. And then he did like a really cool almost CG sequence for Jeff Byers' scene. And each of those, I mean, honestly, he can crank out a scene in like 2 days. It's usually about that fast. So
pretty impressive.
It just depends. Yeah, it just depends on the workload that he's working on at the time. And Chris is a professional, and he works mostly in commercials. And we were lucky enough to have him, from Mothman up through Terror.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was just curious because, like I said, since Tessa and I have been trying to get back into your catalog, I should say, to like really watch from the start of you guys to where you are now. I mean, not only do you really see a difference, but the animation that we're talking about is pretty spot on. I mean, I haven't felt like if they felt like rushing away. I actually kind of like how they're portrayed, just because, he does such a great job in bringing the story or whatever is trying to be told to life, really. And I think without being able to really, as you were mentioning before, like recreating the scene with practical effect, at least in this way, we can still kind of get a similar idea of what is being told. So that way, with us, we can really get more of a idea of what this person had to deal with, and just maybe how maybe the reason why it's hard to even reenactment is, like in this case, with birds, how you're going to get a big suit up in the air without crashing it and stuff like that. So it gets to be a pain, but I just give them props for what I've seen so far. And we still got, I think, 3 or 4 more of your movie to look at. I think I forget exactly, but yeah, I give you all props for what you guys do. With that being said, too, Tessa, is there anything that you noticed when watching Terror in the Sky? I know you've been kind of quiet. Is there anything that you caught your attention?
I just like the movie overall. I think it was really well done, and it was really interesting to hear about the Piasa and the Thunderbirds, and more about the Mothman, and to see that there was more sightings of the Mothman in Chicago, Illinois, besides
Point Pleasant.
Point Pleasant, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely, like, I think of all the subjects we've covered, this is like one of the most interesting. I think a large part of that has to do with the fact that it's so underexplored. So it's not something that people really have a lot of knowledge of to begin with. So it's a little easier to get into something that you haven't already seen covered in like countless television shows or other movies. So, but I'm glad definitely glad you liked it.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think like to touch on what you were saying too, Seth, is like, as the documentary even tells us, like, I believe it was the Thunderbird, maybe it was the Piasa actually. Hang on, brain is trying to think. Maybe it is the Piasa, where they were saying, I forget who it was, the interviewee at the time that was saying, people are actually afraid to even mention or even say the name because they fear, and I think it is Thunderbird now that I think about it, that
Thunderbird said that they'll show up.
Yeah, that they're going to show up and find them. So I thought that was really interesting. So it's almost, well, maybe it's not really like the Mothman because I still don't know how he really shows up. He just kind of shows up and waits for like a perfect moment for a disaster, unless like there's some sort of curse going on, like with Point Pleasant. People I think even till this day, like, it must have been a curse or something, like, because of the Indian that was killed and cursed the place for like 200 years. So, I don't know. To touch on it real quick, so we got the 3 movies coming out next year that you have mentioned: the Mothman Legacy, the Mark of the Bell Witch, and On the Trail of UFO. Now, are you guys planning on doing another crowdfund campaign for that, or do you guys?
Yeah, we launch. That's typically how we fund everything we do throughout the year. So we launch. We always launch those in either late January or early February, and then that's sort of how we manage to fund all the films we make or projects we make throughout the year. So we're still, I mean, obviously our focus is still very much on what we're working on now, like post-production on Momo is like our primary focus right now. But yeah, we'll be launching, I think the next Kickstarter will launch in early February of 2020.
Cool. I'll definitely have to keep my eye out for that from you guys, because I definitely do appreciate your work, and that it's nice to see these crypto stories coming to life in the way that you guys are doing it. So I appreciate it.
Man.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Tessa, is there anything that I didn't catch or that I didn't touch on from either Terror in the Skies or something that you wanted to ask Seth?
No, not really. I'm actually very pleased with all the work that you've done, Seth, with all of your films. I find that I've been really getting into them, and just keep up the good work.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and so Seth, before we wrap this up too, is there anything that I didn't touch on that you would like to talk about?
No, I mean, I think we hit everything, like smalltownmonsters.com and on the trail of .tv are like the best places to learn about our stuff. And then there's social media, all the social media platforms, Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff we're on. And other than that, no, I think we hit everything we could.
Well, that's the way I try to do it around here. Make sure I try to hit as much as I can. And well, I know Momo comes out in, like you said, end of September or October. But if I can ask you now, but if down the road, maybe in like a month or two, Seth, would you like to come back on so we could maybe talk about the other film that you guys have that we could maybe touch on? So if I had it, like any questions or anything that we could maybe throw out there.
Yeah, for sure, man.
I appreciate it, man. And just so you know, if you I don't know if you are in the area, will be in the area when you guys come for like the filming of On the Trail of UFO, from what I was reading earlier. But if you are around the Rutland area, that's where Tessa and I live in Vermont. So
Awesome.
it'd be kind of cool if we could meet up and just meet, and then I'll let you go on with your business, because, like you said, I don't want to keep you from your 3 to 5 days of shooting.
It would just be cool to meet.
It would just be a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, for sure. I'll hit you guys up.
Well, I appreciate it, Seth. And so smalltownmonster.com and onthetrail.tv are the best places for you guys, the listeners, to go. And I believe, yes, there is a newsletter that you guys can sign up for, because I believe I even got a newsletter just today or something. I know I got something from Small Town Monster today from a newsletter or something. But yes, you'll get to learn about all the upcoming projects that Steph and his crew are working on, and you'll probably get the information probably before the public. I don't know how Steph works with Small Town, but about the upcoming Kickstarter next year and the upcoming Momo project, which Seth is more than welcome to come back when Momo comes out too, because that would be a fun one. Remind me again, Seth, Momo, is that another Bigfoot one? I forget.
Yeah, it's a Bigfoot case from like 1973. But the movie itself, Momo, the movie, is going to be very different from anything we've done before, probably will do after. It's a totally different style of filmmaking. I'm actually pretty excited about. The first trailer is going to drop next week. So once the first trailer hits, you'll understand what I'm talking about. It's really weird.
Oh, well, if this episode is not out before then, I'll make sure to provide a link to the trailer in the episode description for everybody listening and stuff. But yes, so Seth, thank you once again for coming back on. I appreciate it, and I'll definitely keep in touch with you as much as I can. And feel free to add Tessa and I if you want to keep in touch that way too. And yeah, can't wait to talk to you again.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Thank you. And for everybody listening, thank you so much. And make sure to support Small Town Monsters by purchasing Terror in Disguise or everything else. And until next time, stay scary.